was a patriotic Japanese as well as a dedicated surgeon. He was both a dutiful and a humanitarian doctor. He was much compelled by his duty to keep the enemy soldier. Knowing that the patient was an enemy soldier, he decided to save his life. The family servants objected and left the home since sheltering an enemy was illegal and punishable. But Dr. Sadao was well aware of all the hard consequences hovering on him, but he showed his sympathy for the patient. His wife too cooperated him in treating the patient. On the other hand, the enemy soldier was aware about his position, since the outside world was readily waiting to gulp him immediately. He knew that the patient was a danger both to the doctor and to himself about it, side by side. But Dr. Sadao had apprised the general, who has promised to get rid of the enemy soldier, but that did not happen. Keeping in view all the facts as well as his safety, he arranged a boat for his enemy's departure with food and other material. So Dr. Sadao advised him to do the signals on reaching, thus he was able to free himself from the wounded soldier. So it can be well estimated that the milk of human kindness, sympathy, security, safety, morality and duty flowed in the views of Dr. Sadao. He was an ideal person, an ideal doctor, an ideal human being. And you see here, Dr. Sadao rose above narrow prejudices of race and country to help a human being in need. Instead of caring for the prejudices of race and country, he rose above to save the American soldier. His wife too lent a helping hand without paying any heed whether the patient was an enemy or a friend. On the other hand, the feeling of compassion and humanity had the upper hand. And at that time, Japan was at war with America, and a person couldn't shelter an enemy. Even during his training, he had realized the unpleasant experiences of racial discrimination among the whites. He had patriotic feelings and could not ignore his duties as a doctor, since the doctor's duty was to save the humanity. Here, the professional loyalty of Dr. Sadao came in conflict with a sense of national loyalty, but he operated upon the American soldier and served him as his house in the most precarious condition of his safety. He could face all the charges of a traitor, but he put his life in danger and saved the soldier. Now you see, children, the chapter is so lengthy, and 3 days back I talked about note making, and you see, if you make notes on this chapter, then you can remember the important points of the chapter, because it's quite difficult to remember each and every line. So it's always convenient for you to make important notes on the chapter and remember. So the purpose of note making is very important here and applicable, isn't it? Now, if you make notes on this, then you can see that the first point will come. This story belongs to the time period of the World War II. Then number 2, Americans and Japanese were enemies. Number 3, Dr. Sadao was a famous Japanese surgeon and a scientist. The next point, he was the most believed surgeon by the old general. The general was not keeping good health, so the doctor was not sent with troops. Sadao completed his higher education in America. There he met Hana. They fell in love and married with the consent of their parents. Next point, one day Dr. Sadao and Hana were standing outside their house, and it was on the coastal line. Next point, it was getting dark and they saw a man staggering out of the sea. He started crawling and then finally fell down on his face. Then Dr. Sadao and his wife thought that he might be a fisherman, but when they went close to him, they were shocked to see an American prisoner of war. Then they thought of throwing him back in the sea, but humanity did not allow him to do so. Sadao decided to save the dying prisoner of war. The American was on the verge of death. Next point, Dr. Sadao took him in and operated upon his wounds and pulled the bullet out. Thus, saved the American's life. Then Dr. Sadao and Hannah kept on serving the Americans even after their servants left the house in resentment. Next, the American was becoming a trouble for them, so Dr. Sadao told everything to the old general. Next point, the general understood his problem and suggested to kill the American quietly. He offered to send his personal assassins for this. Next, Dr. Sadao kept on waiting for the general's assassins for 3 nights, but nothing happened. Now finally, Dr. Sadao sent the soldier to the unguarded island in the sea. He gave him his flashlight also. Now next point, he also instructed him to wait for only the Korean fishing ships. Next point, the old general again fell ill and Sadao attended to his bad condition. Now Sadao told the general that the prisoner had escaped. The general was happy with Sadao and promised to reward him. But Sadao got his real reward when there was no flash of light on that twilight. It meant that the prisoner had gone from the island safe and fine. And next Sadao felt relieved and happy. So how note making is important, so you have come to know now. And if you practice note making on these chapters of your text, then it will be very easier for you to practice note making as well as learn the chapter. So in this way you practice both at the same time. While reading the chapter, you just jot down the main points from the chapter and make notes. The note making will also be practiced by you and the chapter will also be learnt. Understood? And later I shall discuss the question answers of all the chapters. Don't worry, I'll give you the answers of all the chapters.